A few weeks ago, I built this orbital cannon that could shoot targets from quite far away. I really liked the mechanism I used to shoot bombs, and I wanted to try scaling it up massively and making a precision bomber. So starting out in the sandbox, the first thing I wanted to do is actually start working on that mechanism. You can see here I put in a wheel and I put down 4 spokes. Trying this out though, I had it set a bit fast and everything seemed to just explode. Now I am going to try to do this all with unbreaking mode off here, and you can see now I turned down the wheel speed to 4 times. I was hoping that was going to be better, but extending out any of the spokes just instantly broke it. This was already looking like a pretty big problem, so I went ahead here, I shortened everything up and tried bracing it together. This helped a little bit, but it still just sheared all of the wood immediately. So finally here, I turned down the wheel 2 times speed, and this seemed to barely be holding everything together. Now you might be wondering why I wanted this wheel in the first place, and the reason is that I could put grabbers on the outside of it and then put on some bombs. Now if I spin up this wheel, I should be able to throw them off, but just this extra weight of the bombs and the grabbers instantly broke the wheel. Now I made a few adjustments and added on some extra braces, and with this, I was able to throw off all the bombs, but you can see they go in all different directions. That's good, but I'd prefer if I could have all of the bombs shoot in one spot. The other thing I was realizing though is that 4 bombs really isn't that many, and ideally I wanted a really long train to shoot at one target. So you can see what I've been doing in the background here is actually making the wheel a lot bigger, and after that you can see here I actually deleted the center wheel and I'm replacing it with the steering hinge. That'll let me freely rotate this around and it makes it quite a bit more stable. The steering hinge was having a bit of trouble though, and it was clearly vibrating a lot, so I went ahead and actually replaced it here with a wheel. This is an unpowered wheel, so it should be able to freely rotate, and you can see now it looks a lot better. So with this working, now is where the fun begins, because I got to copy this over 9 more times. This is going to give me a total of 36 bombs to throw away, and I figured that'd be a pretty good number. And after getting everything copied up here, I tried giving it a test, but all of the intersecting logs in the middle seemed to just shoot away immediately. So after seeing that, I just deleted everything in the center and I cleaned it up so I just had the outside ring of wood. Once I had that, to hold it all together, I used some extra braces all along the outside and connected up to the center here. You can see I'm using only 4 spokes. Now, with the wheel basically ready to go here, you can see now I'm adding on some water cannons, and these are going to be for the propulsion. Now, to give it a bit more power, I also turned these into steam, and you can see here I'm able to spin this up and actually get some movement. It was a little weak though, so I went ahead and actually boosted up the strength of those cannons, and you can see now I'm getting up to a much better speed. So with this thing moving pretty well here, what I wanted to do next was add on some grabbers and add on the bombs. This was a lot of mass though, and I guess I should have expected this, but now the wheel was going much slower. I still wanted to try shooting this off though, and you can see here all the bombs shoot off away from the center, and I thought that looked pretty good. This of course isn't exactly what I'm going for, and instead I wanted to add on some angle meters, and these are going to be to sense the direction of every single bomb. You can see now I actually shot off this first bomb here, and it went directly over to the left. That I had programmed into the angle meter, and theoretically if I do that for every single bomb, they should all shoot off at the exact same angle. Now the logic portion of this is probably one of the hardest for me to explain, mainly because I made it kind of a mess, but you can see what I'm doing is I'm adding on a steering hinge, and on that, I started to build up this wood wheel. Now the purpose of the steering hinge is to rotate back and forth the angle meters, and by doing that, I can adjust the angle that they shoot at. And after getting everything attached up there, I braced it all together, but this really seemed to like to break immediately, and I was having a lot of trouble keeping this together. So I decided to delete this, and I had a much simpler idea. Instead of making this weird wheel, I can actually just use spokes like this right from the middle, and this should make things a lot easier. You can see here, I added in 3 angle meters, and these are going to be to automatically throw off 3 bombs. Now, before I started programming anything, I did want to copy this over so I'd have 9 of these angle meters. That'll be a solid quarter of the wheel, and I figured if I got that working, I should be in good shape. Now, giving this a very quick test with 6 of the angle meters, you can see that as the wheel rotates, the lights are coming on in succession. That is telling each individual grabber to let go, and they seem to be going in mostly a straight line. A couple of these were shooting straight down, but I think that's mainly caused by the steam, and as long as I turn off the wheel before I shoot, I should be okay. So of course, I finished up those last 3 angle meters and actually copied on another 9 for the bottom set. This is going to let me throw off half of the wheel, and you can see now I'm starting to do that here. It did seem to work, and I actually got all of them to shoot off, so with that done, I just had the last half of the wheel to work with. This was a little harder than I was expecting though, and the main problem that I was having was timing. Now I started out here by inverting all the angle meters, and I set them to shoot off that second set of bombs. After that, I had to add in one logic gate, and this was to fix that timing problem so that it actually would shoot off during the second half of the rotation. Trying this out here, a couple of the bombs went off at the wrong time, and I could see that all 9 of them went off a bit too early. And with a little more tuning, I finally got them to stop randomly coming off the machine. Now you can see here, the first 18 bombs seemed to come off perfectly fine, but after that, 9 of the bombs didn't come off. That was a little worrying, but after waiting a little bit, it was the last 9 bombs that came off instead. So I realized that I guess I just forgot to program those 9 bombs to pop off. And giving it a test now, it seems to work pretty well. Now the reason that I'm calling this a precision bomber is that I'm able to adjust the angle that I'm shooting at. And you can see after rotating it here, I can get all the bombs to shoot directly up in the air. And of course with this, I'll be able to target all the bombs very precisely. Now, one other cool thing about this mechanism is that since all the logic's already there, I can just copy more bombs and scale this a lot more. And you can see now, just get these nice sheets of bombs going off into the distance. Now, I went back down to the single wheel design just to make a few adjustments here, and you can see I got the wheel up to a much higher speed. This was just about as fast as I could get it before the wheel would deform and eventually just explode. Now, I moved the starting cube out of the way, and after I did that, I started to build up a basic structure around this so I'd be able to hold it on the plane. You can see how I'm doing this here, just building up some wood and I'm bracing it all together. After that, still seems to be able to fire off the bombs and nothing is colliding. So with all that looking good, you can see now I'm adding on the wing panels and starting to work on the full plane. Now I went ahead here and I copied these wing panels to the other side, and I immediately realized that this is going to be the biggest plane that I've ever tried to make in Besiege. This is also probably going to be the heaviest plane, so I got to be very careful with bracing. You can see now I'm trying to use braces on multiple parts of the wings. After getting those long struts in place, I also used some smaller braces to stitch it all together. And you can see after that, I actually separated apart the plane, and I'm starting to add in more copies of the bombing mechanism. I realized that just one stream of bombs, while it is cool, isn't really that much, so I copied this over so I'd have 4 copies of them all together. Now the reason I stopped at 4 is that you can see here the lag is kind of bad already, and any more than this and it's gonna get completely unbearable. Now I also decided to take a very small diversion, and you can see now I'm moving the starting cube further down, and after I did that, I'm actually starting to build up small cars here. You can see here I built up 2 identical cars, and this is to start testing propellers. Now after copying over the propellers on both of these, you can see I'm changing the pitch of the propellers on the right car. Now I'm changing it here so it's almost perfectly flat. This you would think shouldn't generate any thrust, but for whatever reason, while it does lose out early on, it eventually overtakes the other propellers by a lot and really drives the car forward. Now the reason I wanted to show this is that propellers in this game are super strange, and to optimize the amount of power I'm producing, I'm gonna want some sort of steering hinge so I can adjust which angle the blades are at. Before I did that though, I just wanted to add in a tail so I'd have a bit more stability and I wouldn't just fall over to the side. So you can see now I built up some wood and I started to use some wing panels to put that all in place. After that, I added in some braces to the outside edges of the wing, and you can see here I'm able to fall straight down and I'm not going too fast. This was a great sign, but to keep this actually moving in the air, now I wanted to add in those propellers. To start out, I went with the simplest propeller design I could think of, and you can see here that 4 propellers on a wheel doesn't actually do that great of a job. I'm still just falling almost straight down and generating very little thrust. So next up here, I doubled the wheel speed, and this actually did seem to be doing something. I was gliding forward a little bit, and while this was still underpowered, it was at least a start. Now to get more power here, the first thing I was thinking was to add in those steering hinges I was talking about to adjust the pitch of the blades. You can see as I rotate them how all the blades rotate and will allow me to go forward faster. This was a pretty huge improvement, and you can see already I'm going forward quite a bit faster. So with this at least looking pretty good here, I need to separate out the blades a bit further from the bombs just so they wouldn't intersect, and after that, I doubled up the propellers. I figured that this extra thrust should really do a good job of keeping me going forward, and you can see already I'm almost maintaining level flight. Now I still have no way of controlling this plane at all, but at the very least this was a pretty good sign. One thing that was a little worrying though is that when I tried to spin up the main wheel, you can see that the steam comes on, but the wheel really doesn't seem to rotate. That was a bit odd, and I was gonna have to come back to that later. For now, I did just want to add on more propellers to get myself even more thrust. I figured 3 should easily be able to make me go forward here, and it was just barely not enough to do it. Now it's getting pretty desperate at this point, so I went for 4 propellers, and I was really hoping that was gonna work. And I also added in some controls to the back so I'll be able to pitch up and down my plane. This was actually working pretty well, and finally here, I was both gaining speed and gaining altitude. That's usually the definition I use to prove that I'm flying, so with that looking good, what I wanted to do next was double up my wing area. That should make it a lot easier to maintain flight here, and after adding those in place, just had to make sure to use some extra braces to stitch it all together. Finally though, I did want to come back to the problem where the wheel wasn't spinning up. To fix that, you can actually see here, I'm changing the water cannons so that instead of having 5 times power, they have -5 times power. For whatever reason, it actually completely stopped shooting out water, but it does still generate thrust in the opposite direction. So I flipped those all around here, and you can see, giving this a test now, I'm able to spin up the wheel and do a quick carpet bombing run. Now this was a very primitive setup here, but it was working, so with at least the proof of concept done, I wanted to put this on the ground and finish up the landing gear. This was gonna be quite difficult because getting all of the weight to sit on just a few wheels is not that easy. And you can see, trying it out, it instantly just fell down and crushed into those wheels. So to hopefully combat that, you can see I added in a ton more braces to hopefully keep the whole thing together. This took a lot more than I was expecting, but finally here you can see I am able to balance on those front wheels, and all I need to do now is add in the rear gear so I'd stop falling back. So I built this up in pretty much the same way here, but fortunately it doesn't need as much bracing because there's a lot less weight back there. And trying this out here, I am able to pull myself forward on the ground, so this isn't looking too bad. The wheels are kind of vibrating a bit, which I'm not a super big fan of, but as long as I keep that to a minimum, I should be okay. Now to let this have an easier time getting off the ground, you can see here what I'm doing is actually deleting some of the wood on the back landing gear, and I'm moving the wheels up. After that, I also moved them further forward, and it's gonna make it a lot easier to take off. And of course, everything seems to take a lot of tries, but eventually I did get this to actually fly up, and with this ready to go, I just need a way to control it so I'm able to steer it anywhere I want. Now the first thing I was thinking here was to add in 4 steering hinges and add on some wings onto those. This should let me adjust the pitch, but they seem to rip off almost immediately. So next, I went ahead and I made their angle a lot lower. This does prevent them from braking, but now they're doing almost nothing. Now to get more surface area, I was thinking here I could just copy over more steering hinges and add on one more set of wing panels. And with all this ready to go here, I wanted to give this a test. While it was able to correct the roll of the plane, you'll notice it's quite slow at doing so. Usually the way I like to control my planes is just by using pitch and roll, but since this thing is so big, I'm going to need some yaw controls to be able to move around. Now fortunately, it's actually pretty easy to add in here, and you can see in the back, I added a couple of steering hinges and I added a couple of wing panels. These let me swing side to side, and with this, you can see I'm able to make some pretty tight turns. This plane is definitely not the most agile, but for how much it weighs, I'm not too displeased with the responsiveness of the controls. In fact, you can actually see here, I'm up in the air, and I wanted to do a bombing test. As I'm shooting off the bombs, you'll notice that they started out going almost directly forward, but then I started to adjust them so they shot more down. This is compensating for the fact that the plane is moving forward, and by doing this, you can see I'm able to have them all hit almost the same spot. This angle change is exactly why this thing can be so precise, and it can hit one target with almost all of the bombs. And of course, with this looking pretty good here, what I wanted to do next was beef up all of my controls to make this go a lot faster. So I started out by adding 50% speed to the propellers, and after that, I added on a little bit more speed to the main wheel. Having this go faster will let me shoot bombs further forward, and with all this ready to go, I wanted to start testing this out. One thing I was curious about is how well I can actually do a carpet bombing run. The main issue I was thinking is that it's kind of hard to move this precisely in any direction, and it's also hard to pull it out of a nosedive. Now, you can see this first test here took off the ground, and after quite a while, I also started to shoot off those bombs. Now, I was aiming for that village below me, but I didn't realize just how far the bombs were going to travel, and they way overshot it. At the very least, though, since I moved the bombs further down as I was shooting, they all seemed to hit at roughly the same time, which I thought was pretty cool. So I went ahead again, and I tried to do another run. This time, you'll notice I'm aiming directly for that village, and I'm trying to shoot as far down as possible. This had a slight unintended consequence of triggering every bomb at once. This just means that I can't start shooting my bombs off almost directly down, or else they'll always be doing that. Now, I also came back here, and I wanted to try doing a bombing run to this village. Now, this time, I wasn't going for a super precise target, and I wanted to just try going for a normal carpet bomb here and seeing how it would do. Now, I noticed some problems with this, and one of them is that if the bombs get too close together, they will set each other off in the air, and I do have to be a little careful of that. For the most part, though, the bombs were spaced apart just enough that I was able to have them keep rolling forward and destroy that entire length of the village. This build was actually pretty fun to do, and I was kind of surprised I could get this much mass in the air. One thing I had in mind that I eventually scrapped is actually being able to shoot each of the sets of bombs off individually. Theoretically, this wouldn't be too bad to set up, but I would need to add in some more logic gates to trigger which stream I want to go off at what time, and I realized that in most circumstances, I pretty much just wanted to shoot off every bomb at once anyway. This thing is also so massive, it's pretty much impossible to actually turn within the limits of the Besiege map. At the very least, though, this thing is a ton of fun to play with, and I'm just glad it is able to take off the ground. So make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to leave those down below, and otherwise, till next time.